Now it's time to take a look at waste disposal methods. How do we handle this waste that we've generated? How do we take care of it? How do we take it from our homes and put it back into nature? Okay? And the number one way is through sanitary landfills. A sanitary landfill is very simple. It all started with the Pollution Prevention Act, and then it required in 1994 that all operating landfills, all right, are able to control the amount of toxins and hazardous materials that they generate. And we'll see how it's done. All right, historically, they didn't do that. What they did basically was they dig a hole in the ground, all right, and become like an open dump. And the landfills were constructed so that they would, fill up and then be buried, and then we just kind of, out of sight, out of mind. But then we found out that the materials in there were decomposing and leaching out toxic substances into our groundwater. It became very difficult to build them. Nobody wanted a landfill near them. All right, and the problem of what we call siting, which is taking a landfill and putting it somewhere, basically, all right, is a situation called siting a landfill. Became very difficult because nobody wanted a landfill near them. All right, so this concept of siting turned out to be a real difficult one. So we created these sanitary landfills, and still there's a problem today, but not as bad as there was in the past. And we'll take a look at how we should make a modern landfill. All right, one that's suitable. All right, so it's very simple. They come, they dump they create a depression in the ground. Okay, keep it away from places where groundwater gets very close to the surface. They bring the trash in, they compact the trash, put a layer of soil, and then continue to do that until the entire hole is filled in. Now, trash comes in many forms, all right, placed in the landfills. But the idea is to take this waste and prevent it from ever harming people in the environment and the environment itself. You can see the mounds and mounds of trash coming out, especially the amount of plastics in a container like this and like that. You get the huge containers. Now what you're looking at here is a former site of a landfill and an operating landfill at the same time. And I'll show you very quickly. Over in this area, this is a former landfill that's done and capped. Okay, that one's finished. But over on the other side, here you can actually see the trash being deposited in the landfill. And this is a fully operational landfill. The leftover liquids that are generated, you can see over here and up here. Those are the leachate ponds, which collect that liquid that's coming out of the landfill, which we'll always get into great detail on. Okay, and so that's just one picture of many that you're going to see. This is a picture taken off of Route 33 just above Allentown, and it looks like just a normal hill off in the distance, but that actually is a landfill. Oftentimes you just see a little hill in an area that probably shouldn't have one. Okay, and that's an actual operating landfill. If you grew up in this area, this is where most of your trash is today. All right, this is the Pottstown Landfill. Over on the right-hand side of the picture is Route 422. This is now closed, so your more recent trash in the last 5 years or so goes to Lower Bucks County, most of it, or out into western Pennsylvania. But you can see the leachate holding ponds off on the left there. And this was where, if you grew up, like I said, in Souderton, if you were born here, your first diaper is still sitting in there somewhere. All the landfills in Pennsylvania are scattered throughout the state, but mostly concentrated in the southeastern corner and the southwestern corner. All right, why is that? Because you site your landfills as close to the source of the trash as possible to reduce the cost of transporting that trash. So your major population areas to the southeast and to the southwest of Pennsylvania is where you're going to find most of your landfills. You don't want to put a landfill in the middle of Pennsylvania where nobody lives. It just gets too expensive to take it there. But that option is a possible one because of the siting problems. Nobody wants a landfill near them, so landfills are getting put into more and more and more rural areas. So how exactly does a landfill work? Okay, it all starts with this plastic liner at the bottom. The first thing you notice is the soil is kind of reddish. That's because you like what type of soil. If you're worried about leachate pollution or liquids getting into the ground, you would like this soil to be clay, because compacted clay, with the particles being so small, they're like little plates, and when you compact the clay, you literally create a barrier to water. All right, so water can't go through. So as water tries to trickle down, it gets held back by the compacted clay. So you'll put compacted clay down, and then you put the liner down on top of that clay. And then the idea is that you have almost like a double barrier to prevent any type of liquids or anything getting into your groundwater. And there's the liner again. The liner is very thick and very strong. Okay. Then you put on your leachate collection pipes. These are the pipes that you use to collect the toxic liquids that filter down through your trash and through the materials. And here they are putting it on, and there you see some more leachate collection pipes. And this is just a different type of soil being put in, but here's the best picture. Here now you can start putting the trash in. The idea is that you put the trash on, you compact it, spread it out, compact it as much as you can, and then you come in with the soil, and you put the soil on top, because the soil then prevents the smell and prevents animals from getting to your trash. And here they are dumping huge amounts of trash. And then, of course, you have machines specially designed to push the trash around. You can tell by the wheels that it's specially designed for this particular job. Then what's in a landfill? Well, you really don't know. All right, but if you look on this, you can always pause it, and I ask you to find basically three things in here. Number one would be the flower. All right, number two is the apple. And then number three is the coffee mug. Good luck, you can give that a try if you want. But I'm going to continue on. Back to anatomy of a landfill and what it's like. Once you have the landfill filled up with the trash to the maximum height that you're allowed, then what you do is you put the final layer of soil on, and then you put on what we call the landfill cap, which is just another layer of plastic. Our goal here is to make the world's most giant trash bag possible. And the goal is to prevent any type of water getting into that landfill. Why is that important? Because water getting in the landfill is going to cause more decomposition. More decomposition with the water is going to form more leachate. Leachate is the biggest problem in landfills. Okay, so we want to prevent that from happening. So we create the cap so that we prevent water from getting in. Now the problem with this is that the liquids that are already in the landfill will keep the landfill decomposing for another 30 years or so. But then after that, it's done. There's no more decomposition. Whatever's left in there remains in there. And that's why I said, like, things like your old disposable diapers, they don't decompose because they're made mostly of plastic. That plastic is going to remain in that landfill for as long as we can imagine. In fact, when you mine or go through landfills, you do archaeology studies, which there's many colleges do archaeology studies using landfills. When they drill down, the way they tell how old something is when they pull it out of a landfill is by very simply reading the newspapers that come up with it. So if you find an old shoe and you want to know when that shoe was thrown away, you go and grab a piece of newspaper that was buried at the same time, and you read the date on the newspaper. So that shoe was 30 years old, let's say. All right, so stuff does not decompose in a landfill like everybody thinks. It doesn't disappear. It's like a holding place on Earth. And then that's the final product. That's what you see. Now, there's one thing that you don't notice on here, which is very, very important to think about when you talk about landfills, is that when you have a landfill, that decomposition going on anaerobically is going to create methane gas, CH4. That methane gas you do not want bubbling up into the atmosphere, because CH4 is a greenhouse gas, and it's going to help create global warming and climate change. So you want to do whatever you can to capture that. But then what do you do with captured methane gas? Well, captured methane gas can be used to burn. It's actually natural gas. And when you burn it, you can use it to generate electricity. So many of our landfills are hooked up to a methane power plant. And then that power plant gets to use the methane from the landfill for about 30 or 40 years to generate electricity. All right, so we got to be very careful. Many times we just vent the methane into the atmosphere. Now with climate change and all the knowledge that we have with climate change, we can't let that happen anymore. We got to prevent that from happening. So instead now we got to capture it and then use that methane gas. Okay, so again, you got soil, trash, soil, trash, soil, trash. At the bottom you got your plastic liner. Right above the plastic liner you got your leachate collection pipes. Somewhere in there you've got to have methane pipes, all right, to vent out the methane, to collect for electrical generation. And then finally, the one thing that's not really inside the landfill, it's just outside the landfill, and that is wells drilled deep down to see and test and monitor if any of that leachate escapes. All right, so you end up with an entire process to protect and keep that trash there for a long, long time. Now, if we don't want to spend, or let's say our landfills are filling up, we end up exporting a lot of our trash. So the developed world sends our trash to the developing world, because the developing world, having no money, takes very little payment for us to just basically dump our trash in their countries. So when we talk about exporting waste, although most industrialized nations, including the United States, have agreed to stop shipping hazardous and toxic waste to less developed countries, that practice still continues in some cases. But what we do is we send our regular trash, and we call this garbage imperialism. Wealthy countries, to get rid of their waste, send it off to developing countries where they get our waste. Okay, and now you say, well, that'll supply some jobs. Here's a man pulling off the green boards out of computers, and that's wonderful because he's recycling them and getting money for them, and that is true. The problem is there are no environmental controls on this particular process. Computers not only have valuable metals, they also have toxic metals in them. Many times to get those metals off, they have to burn away the plastic. Okay. Oh, this guy is standing on a pond, not on rocks, but on computer monitors. But here they are burning off the plastics to get the metals, and the plastics, when burned, give off toxic chemicals. Also, there's lead in there. That lead goes in the atmosphere, and in fact, most of these people have died of toxic poisoning from this process. All right, trash is exported to other countries which can't deal with it. So we got to prevent that from happening as much as possible. Not only do we export it to other countries, but believe it or not, this is a satellite image or a Earth image of orbiting pieces of trash. We actually have trash floating around our planet. In fact, we have a ring. If you look at this image very closely, you can see that the Earth has a ring, and that ring is made out of trash. These are usually leftover pieces of satellites, things that came off of ships going out into space. Okay, but basically it is trash. So every time a rocket ship goes up into space, they have to monitor those pieces of trash as they move through space to make sure that there's no collision occurring with our it used to be the space shuttle or any other type of ship that's going up there. All right, now there's a second. If you remember, disposal, which is a landfill, is considered the worst option. So what's the next best option? Well, that is this idea of incineration. Okay, now we call it resource recovery, or sometimes we call it energy recovery, because now what we're going to do is we're going to treat our waste. We call this treatment. And I'll put that in quotes because I don't know if I really call it treatment, but we treat our waste, and the purpose of this is very simple. When you burn it, you actually reduce the volume of trash. We reduce the volume by as much as 80%. So you're reducing the volume of the waste, therefore you only put 20% into landfill. So the thing is about incineration and energy recovery, is that you don't get rid of the need for landfills. You still need landfills, but you can make landfills last a lot longer. All right, so you're reducing the volume by 80%. That has to go to a landfill. And that's one of the great benefits. And then not only that, but when you burn the trash, you get heat. All right, that heat then can be used to turn steam or turn water into steam, and you can use that to generate electricity. So you can actually make electricity from our trash. Now, I've been able to visit a couple of these plants. I was able to be inside these, and although they're very intimidating, it at least gives us an option that we didn't have before for our trash. So it gives us something to look at. So let's take a look at what an incinerator looks like. This one you're familiar with, okay? This is the one that is in Conshohocken. Every time you go down the turnpike, at the bottom of the turnpike, when you go through a toll booth, you're going to pass by this trash incinerator. This is right across the street from IKEA and in Plymouth Meeting, and this is the place that you see all the time and people will talk about. All right, how does it work? Okay, this is a great diagram. So is that. So we have two different diagrams to work with. Okay, just so you know, we're going to be looking at both of these. I think I'm going to use this one. Okay, but you can always come back to this one and use it to help you out if you're not quite sure. So this is how it works. The trash trucks come in. We'll make this a pretty blue trash truck. All right, and they dump their trash into this giant pit, which is usually about 3 stories deep. All right, then this crane comes along and mixes this trash up. You want to mix it as much as possible, and it's kind of a weird thought, but when you mix the trash, it actually helps the trash become more evenly burned. It burns more even because sometimes trash trucks will go to an area that has a lot of restaurants and their waste is very wet, while other trucks come from construction sites where their waste is very dry. And so you want to mix that all up, because then what you're going to do is, using the crane, you're going to take the trash and put it down on a conveyor belt, which puts it into a furnace, which burns it. If that's supposed to be my flame down there. Okay, where you burn the trash. All right, the trash then, obviously, when you burn it, gives off tremendous amounts of heat. Okay, which then you send water into these pipes. And what's going to happen to your water? It's very simple. With all that heat, water is going to turn into steam. All right, that steam is going to rise up, and then you're going to take the steam and spin a turbine. All right, which spins a generator, which then makes electricity that goes to your house. All right, there's some problems now. Let's take a look at the aftermath of that. That's the nice part. We're reducing the volume by up to 80%. You're generating heat to make electricity. All right, but what else are you generating? Well, let's look at it first of all. Some of the material won't burn. That stuff gets put on a conveyor belt. Okay, and then a lot of times they'll put magnets in here to pull out any of the metals, or take some of the recyclables out, but mostly then it goes into a truck, which is then taken to a landfill. This material that's left over is called bottom ash. We call it bottom ash. Okay, it's the material that's left over. It's the ashes and stuff that don't burn, don't go into the atmosphere, remain a solid, and that gets taken to a landfill. But what I want to talk about, sorry about that, what I want to talk about here is the other ash, and we call this fly ash. All right, fly ash is the exhaust or the air pollution that comes out. So when you burn this, all right, fly ash comes out, and this stuff is extremely toxic. Extremely toxic. Because what you're doing is you're burning plastics, you're burning rubber, you're burning chemicals even. All right. When I was looking inside the furnace through a small hole, I saw small explosions taking place of canisters of who knows what, whether it's a spray or a propane tank or whatever. These explosions were occurring, giving off these toxic chemicals. Or when you burn plastics, you're going to give off toxic chemicals. So the fly ash is extremely, extremely toxic. But the problem is you have to get that exhaust out of your building. So what you do is you send it through devices that actually clean that pollution, that smoke. One is called a scrubber. All right. The other one, they call this a filter. It's actually called an electrostatic precipitator. You will have to know how that works. Right now, I'm going to kind of skip that part of it and move on. But basically what you're doing is you're cleaning the exhaust out of here. Okay? And then, once you're all done, then you let it go up the smokestack and then out. The problem is you can't get rid of all the toxins. All right? But you're going to get rid of a lot, but you're still going to give off mercury and other toxins out of that exhaust. So fly ash is a big, serious problem with our incinerators. Okay? All right. Let's make sure you got all that. We're going to move on from there. This is the control room inside an incinerator. Here's the room where they're coming in to dump the trash. And you can see the big pit. You actually see the crane sitting in the trash while it's mixing it. Okay, this is some of the trash I got left behind on the concrete barrier. All right, these are the crane operators. There's the crane itself. Here's a good picture of the pit where they're mixing all the trash. All right, that then is what gets burned. If you're looking at the combustion rates, in other words, who has the greatest amount of incineration, it's kind of odd because I can't find any type of recent statistics to support this, but if you look at it just in general concept, you will see that Pennsylvania is one of the leaders in the United States on burning trash. That's one of the ways we decided we were going to deal with our trash problem, our waste problem. This is bottom ash. Okay, the top left is bottom ash, which gets taken to a landfill. The bottom right is fly ash, the stuff that was cleaned out of the exhaust, either through the electrostatic precipitator or through the scrubber. What do we do with that? It's toxic. Well, we created a very unique way of recycling it. We make it into bricks and concrete blocks. Yes, fly ash is actually put into concrete blocks. So instead of disposing it, we put it into our building materials. Incinerators do cause a lot of concern. Nobody wants to be near one. The siting of incinerators is very difficult. In fact, the one down that I just talked about down near Plymouth Meeting, across from IKEA, was supposed to be and was planned to be put in Souderton. But we were able to politically get it rejected here at Souderton, and it ended up down there. All right, but you can see that it is not an easy way of dealing with our waste because nobody wants to live near incinerators. So I think we have to look into other options, and that's what we'll do in the next lecture.